We are back for another crossover edition, Locked on Packers, Locked on Bears. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked on Packers, with Lorin Cox from Locked on Bears. We have a great show for you. Rivalry week is back, Green Bay and Chicago. Today's episode is brought to you by On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, and it's the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. And of course, we'd like to thank everyone who makes Locked on Packers or Locked on Bears their first listen of the day. Lorin, this was very different the first time around because these two teams, at least in Chicago's case, there was a lot more optimism around this team when we did this the first time. I would say that Justin Fields' optimism has not necessarily waned, but this Bears team finds itself in a very different position for this season.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tough spot, and it's a familiar spot, though, for Bears fans, especially now going into this game, not really knowing exactly who the quarterback is going to be injury-wise. Fields, practicing on a limited basis, but Matt Nagy's kind of said rib injury is something that's more about pain tolerance at this point, that, when he's ready to go out there, they're not going to risk like injury. They're only, when they know it's strong enough, then it's just a matter of whether he can put up with it. So it's like, are we going to get the Dalton experience? And they've been so banged up at receiver, and the defense is missing some of their top players. And it was already a team that was struggling to put together consistency. And then when you add up a lot more injuries on top of that, a very minimal optimism, if any, in this game compared to last time when at least the Bears had won a couple of games back to back. And even though Green Bay was still hot at the time too, there was still some thought there that maybe they might just be able to pull something off at that point. Not going to hear much of that discussion this week.
No, the Packers opened the week as 12.5-point favorites on BetOnline. It is still the Sunday night game because Packers-Bears is always going to rate. So, like I said, a lot has changed over the last few weeks since these teams last met. The Bears are now 4-8. In all likelihood, they are not going to pull off some sort of miracle run here at the end of the year and make the playoffs. So, what are you looking for now, week to week, not just in this game, but in any game going, okay, I'm hoping to see this from whether it's this player, this side of the ball. What are you now trying to glean out of this in these games?
It's definitely one of those situations where you look to the younger players and say, okay, where are their guys getting better and developing in these games, even when they might not matter all that much. But the Bears are still taking this from the standpoint of like, of course, the cliche 1 week at a time or whatever, but also like they're only like a game or two out of a playoff spot. And like, it's an insurmountable schedule at this point and odds to be able to make the playoffs and kind of do anything with it. But because they haven't been mathematically eliminated, the team is still able to sort of harness some of that motivation, still feel like they do have maybe some odds of something to play for. And I think there is still pretty good buy-in from the locker room in terms of actually, not necessarily fully believing in Matt Nagy as the long-term head coaching answer, but at least believing in each other and their teammates to say, this is what we really want to and have to play for. But in terms of like specifically, of course, as soon as Justin Fields is back on the field, that is out there and get more injured and have any sort of negative consequences from him being out on the field. But that's definitely going to be spot number one. Spot number two is just kind of this defense as a whole with a, first-year defensive coordinator. They've struggled quite a bit with injuries, but then also just with guys not playing well. Eddie Jackson still has not had a strong game at all this season, has been particularly poor. You're waiting for him to turn around. They've got this rotation of guys at cornerback. You're looking for some young player somewhere to maybe step up and look like some kind of potential difference maker for the future. And they've got a couple of other young guys, edge rusher, offensive tackle, a few spots here and there, running back too, that, you just want to kind of see more things to leave you optimistic for those guys moving in, because they're going to have a lot of turnover on this roster this offseason.
So as you look at the offseason, but as you look at the schedule, excuse me, let me try and speak, Lorin. I'm so sorry. As you look at this roster heading into the offseason, is there a way that you would approach moving forward? And I mean structurally, organizationally, because they're going to have a new head coach in all likelihood. We will see about the general manager. If you want to offer your thoughts on Ryan Pace, feel free. But just like this team is built to do what, and therefore they need to do what else this offseason?
Well, that's the problem, right? I think the numbers I'd seen, and I don't remember if these are exactly right, but I think they currently have 26 players under contract for next year, and I think projected $44 million of salary cap space. I mean, they have one wide receiver. Is Darnell Moon is the only one who's under contract. They don't have a center or a right guard under contract for next season. They've got, and then a bunch of holes on the defense. They have a lot of work to do and not a lot of money to do so, which is again quite a significant reflection on that general manager, as to why it seems like, you're ready to move on from him, at least from a fan base perspective, right? It's tough because like if Justin Fields is the real deal, Ryan Pace deserves credit for going and getting him, and he's done a good job of finding, late round draft picks that have played really well. Darnell Mooney, Eddie Jackson,
sure.
Adrian Amos of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, Bilal Nichols. They've had a lot of those 4th, 5th, and 6th round guys that have played well, and the general manager deserves credit for that. He's not the worst GM in the NFL by any means, but there's enough of those free agent busts and financial mishandlings or just pushing that salary cap into the future because he's from the New Orleans Saints sort of general managing tree and really following suit in their financial salary cap management that just he definitely has held this team back in a lot of ways and made enough mistakes that have certainly helped make life more difficult for Matt Nagy, who also hasn't done great too. So they really, I think they really should share the blame, but Ryan Pace has done a great job of distancing himself from that so far, and kind of everyone's only talking about fire Matt Nagy, fire Matt Nagy. The fans aren't chanting fire Ryan Pace, and I think he's strategically avoided some of the blame here pretty intelligently.
Let me throw 2 names at you, coaching wise, and tell me what you think. These are not necessarily the guys that I would pick, but guys that I think would appeal to Chicago, given the way ownership has talked about the head coach position in the past. And they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum in a way, but one is Doug Peterson, a Super Bowl winning head coach. I had brought him up to you in the past, and you said, well, but is that too close to Matt Nagy because of the history there? And then the other, we'll see what's going on in the Pacific Northwest, but the other that I have sort of trolled Bears fans with before, but I actually think if he is available, would be appealing to Chicago, is Pete Carroll.
I was surprised neither one of those was Jim Harbaugh, and then I was also surprised neither one was Sean Payton, because those are the two that Bears fans kind of have circled. Yeah,
interesting.
I think both of those names would be interesting, and I mean, like you sort of hinted at, like I don't know that there's going to be this appetite to go to immediately to another Andy Reid offshoot running a very similar offense, just with a different voice and a different mentality. I mean, it would be different, but is it fresh enough to sell Bears fans? Because I think that's what it comes down to with ownership, is like they seem to care a lot about public perception, and for right. I was gonna say for better and for worse, but it's pretty much always for worse for the most part there. I mean, you could sell the, hey, like Super Bowl champion thing, but he's also got the Nick Foles connection, so it's like, well, and Nick Foles is still supposed to be under contract. He's fully guaranteed contract next season unless they can find somebody to take him. So like there's enough of those lingering connections to Doug that it's hard for me to see them.
They really don't want to fire Ryan Pace on. Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's like, I think you could make some pretty good arguments as to why Doug would be a decent hire. I just don't think perception wise that would be as good. Pete Carroll, on the other hand, I think they could easily really get into if he became available. I mean, the pedigree is there, but it's enough of a removal from what they have, and just he's sort of a little bit more, tough, kind of old school. I mean, he's not old
culture
school
builder.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. He's riding the ship a little bit more, and I mean, not that the Bears completely need to, completely change everything about what they were doing. Nagy was able to make the playoffs twice, so they're not building up from scratch necessarily, but he could be a guy that's not going to put too much of the pressure on Justin Fields and want to build some things around him. And of course, strong defenses they've had in Seattle would always go over well in Chicago.
Who would you hire?
It feels like it's a bad time in the coaching cycle a little bit, where it's like, Dable in Buffalo is kind of, I mean, he's had his ups, but he's had some real downs again this season, and Allen's kind of been up and down. And how much do you trust?
I mean, Monday.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. Or like, Harbaugh, even like he's been terrible at Michigan for years, so now he's got one good year. Is that enough to say, yep, make him my head coach? And of course, Joe Brady was starting to be in that discussion, but he's been fired from Carolina too. So it makes the idea of like a Pete Carroll or a Sean Payton, somebody who, like, what you're getting there, even if it's less sexy and exciting and brand new, young, up and coming type guy, but just like guy who has a ring, like, sure, absolutely. It's like I could see the team opting a little bit more there, and that's where I find myself going at this stage. But I kind of like to see how things play out the rest of the year. But I'm not feeling great about where the team sits right now in that search.
Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell, those are interesting names to me, but I under no circumstances do I think Chicago would actually do something like that. All right, we are going to move forward with the crossover coming up in just a little bit. Before we do, let's talk about our friends at On Location. Super Bowl 56 at SoFi Stadium is less than 100 days away, and On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Select your exact seat and choose from elite experiences featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star LA hotels, and food by the great Wolfgang Puck, one of my favorites. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. That's onlocationexp.com/SB56 or search Super Bowl On Location. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetOnline. They've got you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march to the playoffs. And betting on playoff football is the best. It is absolutely the best. And BetOnline is your number one spot for all your sports action this season. I've got some futures out there that I'm hoping are going to hit in the playoffs. We will see. I have Green Bay at 13-1 coming into the year to win the Super Bowl, with a nice chunk of change that I would get if that cashes. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile site and sign up today to receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Las Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I may or may not have had Matt Nagy, first coach, fired.
Well, the Bears have never fired a head coach mid-season before, made it a little bit of a long shot. But hey, this crossover Thursday continues here. Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears alongside Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers. Two teams that have had quite a few injuries. I guess every team always has a lot of injuries, but it's hit at some key positions for both of these teams. And we got to see Aaron Rodgers' toe up close and personal just a couple weeks ago before the bye week. We know it's not COVID toe, which he made up on his interview with Pat McAfee, but I know that there was this debate of like, does he do like a quick surgery and try and recover over the bye week, or just kind of let it heal, that maybe the bye week would give him a week off? And what was sort of the decision that went in there? And I know it's still early in the week, but what do we know about how much that toe actually affects him on Sundays?
Well, it hurts. It hurts a lot, according to him. He said on the Pat McAfee show that he has consulted. He got a second opinion in LA on it.
From Joe Rogan or a real doctor?
I don't have information on who it was exactly. No, it's actually been reported who specifically he met with. I don't know if he has taken any more medical advice from Joe Rogan or any other podcast hosts.
Maybe Locked On Packers.
I've offered some. I can't confirm or deny that he's taken any of it. So we'll see. But he has said it's quite painful. He's a guy that has played hurt plenty of times in his career. So I sort of, when he says, yeah, this actually really sucks to play on, like, we didn't hear all of 2018 about what really the injury was. And then at the end of the year, it turned out he said it was a tibial plateau fracture. Paige Beckers, the UConn women's basketball player, just had that. She's going to be out, I think, 8 weeks. And he apparently played on it all year and didn't say anything. So I don't think he says, oh, my pinky toe hurts, to get sympathy, because of all the things that are going to hurt. Like, the lamest feels like your pinky toe, even though anyone who's ever had an issue with their toe, I broke my pinky toe once. It sucks. You realize how much pressure is on your pinky toe at all times if you have a situation like that. So I may or may not have had too much to drink and banged it on a sidewalk.
Very Wisconsin of you.
Oh my God, the most Wisconsin. I was running back from my car to double check that it was locked into the apartment, and just banged on the sidewalk. It hurts, but we haven't seen really any evidence on the field in terms of his play that it hinders him. The closest came a couple weeks ago when Jordan Love had to do some kneel downs at the end of the half because Rodgers was going in to get it shot up, presumably. He was going in with trainers. I believe that was the Vikings game. So he's had a couple long runs since this apparently happened. He doesn't seem skittish in the pocket with his footwork. So it's hard to say that this is impeding his ability to play quality football in any way. Now, if someone falls on it, maybe that's a different situation. He's never been someone who has to have his feet planted. He makes throws with no feet on the ground sometimes. So he doesn't, I don't think you're worried about his weight transfer or anything like that. What he said was it's an injury that you'd really like to have 2 to 3 weeks off rather than just a week. And so he's not going to practice all week again. Mostly he's going to get treatment. And so that'll have been, he hasn't practiced in over a month. And that doesn't seem to have affected his sharpness because the last 2 weeks, especially, he's been incredibly accurate. He was downright surgical against the Rams despite not practicing all week.
Yeah, looking back at those last couple of weeks, they lost to the Vikings and last week against the Rams, 3 turnovers from Matthew Stafford, definitely, including a pick 6, definitely kind of helped push Green Bay over the top in that one. Yeah. But in both cases, like close games and Rams, obviously a legitimate contender, Vikings less so. What has kept? How did they lose to the Vikings? And I guess why did it take 3 turnovers from Stafford? Like where have the Packers been maybe vulnerable in those 2 matchups?
Big plays. And it is something that they had avoided all season. They had been one of the best. They had been top 5 all season in avoiding explosive plays, especially through the air. And in the case of the Vikings, they got pressure on Kirk Cousins on, if we're rounding, 41% of dropbacks. That is a lot. And Kirk Cousins killed them, killed their pressure. And it wasn't just blitzes. It was plenty of 4-man rushes. It didn't matter. And the game-winning touchdown, essentially, or the game-tying touchdown to Justin Jefferson, came on 3rd down on a blitz where Darnell Savage was a heat-seeking missile in his face, and Kirk just heaved it, and it worked. And they scored on a couple 3rd downs. They completed a couple long 3rd downs. It was a lot of stuff that I think in broad terms with some variance. You don't expect a player like Kirk Cousins or any quarterback to play as well under pressure as he did. In fact, I think it was the best Vikings performance by a quarterback under pressure in the next gen sports era or something crazy like that. Like just a little fluky, really. And the Vikings have really good receivers. So, that can happen. But it's just you're not going to lose if you play the game like that 10 times, you're not going to lose 8 of them playing that way. And then in the case of the Rams, pretty similar. They controlled that game. The final score says it was close, but it wasn't. If Mason Crosby makes a 29-yard field goal, they win that game by double digits, and it's not a 1-score game. It goes in the books as one. But it was 2 long touchdowns, one to Van Jefferson where Chandon Sullivan slipped as the ball is arriving, just really unlucky, got his feet tangled. And then another was a double move to OBJ on Rasul Douglas, who got him back with a pick 6. So it's really been just a couple big plays that have kept the defense from really, really playing good football here the last couple weeks. And really since week 1, this defense has been top 10 in EPA per play. That's even been true since Jair Alexander went down in week 4. And now it looks like there's a chance Jair Alexander could be back. Za'Darius Smith could be back. Not likely for this game, but back this season. And so that would elevate this defense even further.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does it tend to be the cornerbacks there? Those 2 against the Rams kind of added up, but because we think of Savage and Amos as being a solid safety combination, and Chris Campbell's been playing really well at linebacker for them. So is it just sort of like one-offs by the quarterbacks, or is there a communication thing there, or is it structurally just like good play call against whatever the coverage happened to be?
Yeah, so in the case of Minnesota, a little bit of both. They had a really great red zone package with Justin Jefferson in the backfield that the Packers just didn't have an answer for. And so, you get Justin Jefferson on an angle route against a safety, a backup safety, in this case, Henry Black. Like that's just toast all day against every team in the league. It's just a great play design. They went after Eric Stokes a little bit in the Vikings game on some levels routes where they expect him in Packers are a heavy zone team to They were sneaking corners in behind him with stuff in front, and so he's having to decide: do I play up or do I come back? And this is the same problem that by the way that Chicago corners have to deal with in the Sean Desai defense. And it worked, right? So they got Eric Stokes, a rookie, to make some rookie mistakes with some really nice play designs. The Rams were not able to do that. They went at Eric Stokes a couple times and there was nothing there. They tried to do some similar things and the Packers handled it much better. That's what you want to see from a rookie. Make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, but don't make them again and again and again. And so they have, as you mentioned, leaned on their great safety play to pick up the slack when there has been issues. But they're not a team, even though they're a team that play a bunch of too high. They're not a team that gives their corners a bunch of help. They're not gonna run all of this like cloud coverage or like man coverage with a safety to set to one side. That's just not really how they work. Although we did see it at times with the Rams. I believe it was the Van Jefferson touchdown. They doubled Cooper Kupp and OBJ. And so the safeties had both sort of come up to play this modified cloud, and the Rams just had the perfect play call on it. And they had Van Jefferson on a deep over, and it's really Van Jefferson against space, because at that point there's just no one in the deep middle. So they just kind of got lucky, but if the Packers are going to do that, and they had sent some help to Cooper Kupp's side, then you're able to get that stuff in behind, but they don't generally do that a lot. They're a very disciplined group, and so I'm interested to see against a team like Chicago, they have Allen Robinson when he's healthy, he's a very good football player. Darnell Mooney, are they going to give any help? Or are they just going to stick in that two shell? We'll see.
It's been a few weeks since Robinson has played. We'll see if he's going to be back. If not, just double Darnell Mooney. There's not going to be much else the Bears can go to at the passing game. We'll dive in a little bit more to some of these potential matchups and give some predictions and all that more coming up next on this Locked On Crossover Wednesday podcast. This crossover is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the makers of the world's best tasting protein bar. In this holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, because they're all rich, covered in 100% real chocolate, and the flavors are just unreal. I particularly love the coconut brownie chunk. I've still been holding out. I got some in my pantry right now. I have to kind of limit myself to just eating one a day, because otherwise I will go through way too many. I mean, I could just throw those down because they do taste like candy bars, but they're somehow also delicious, but low in sugar, low calories, high fiber, and high protein. It is the best of both worlds. You get something that's delicious and healthy. I promise you will find a flavor you love. You'll find a lot of flavors you love. I know I have. I've tried pretty much all of them up to this point, and there has not been a single bad one yet. Head on over to built.com and use our promo code LOCKED15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
All right, Lorin. So we haven't really dug into the nitty gritty of this matchup much so far. So let's do some of that. If you're looking at this from the Chicago perspective, that's what you're here for, right? Is there something where you're going, okay, if the Bears can do this, it gives them a chance to be in this game late, and whether it's have a chance to win or have a chance to make it close, whatever you think, what is that one thing?
I kind of look at what the New England Patriots were able to do to the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football, and I kind of like that idea. I mean, the Packers' run defense has been great this season. Don't get me wrong, but the Bears need to be even more of a rushing team, and they were able to do that fairly well last week. And they got David Montgomery going, and 4 interceptions from Andy Dalton kind of derailed whatever chance they had at maybe trying to upset the Arizona Cardinals. But I mean,
that'll happen.
Let's be honest, they didn't have much chance in that game either, but they did. I mean, they kept it maybe closer than I might have thought they did, because they got Montgomery going in the running game, and they sort of try to stretch the field vertically and create some of that space to then, check it down to Montgomery or the tight ends a little bit more. And of course, they had a couple of passes go through the hands of receivers into the hands of defensive backs, and then a batted pass at the line of scrimmage got picked off. Like, it wasn't as though Dalton was individually horrific. I mean, he wasn't good, but he wasn't like as horrific as the stat line might suggest. But maybe we'll see Justin Fields, and maybe that opens some things up a little bit more. But I want to see the Bears stick with the running game, even if the Packers start to clamp down on it a little bit more. Let David Montgomery kind of get things churning a little bit more. And even when it's like Matt Nagy's been so inclined to kind of abandon it, especially by the time they get to the second half, even when they're behind on the scoreboard. And I think that's the formula to just keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. It's not necessarily a plus matchup to, as far as like, finding, the running game having that much success against a team that has stopped it pretty well. But I just think anytime you can keep Rodgers from passing it all over your defense, because that's a really major concern for me, is this Bears secondary.
Yeah. And that was what I had in mind when I asked you the question. I was like, I wanted to just say, this is my concern, because that would be it, is they're able to be efficient with David Montgomery. And then that opens up, the play action. Because if they're not going to stick to the run, and this is the thing, it's something that I've talked about plenty on this show, is no, you don't need to have a good running game to have a good play action game. But teams need to think like there's a 5% chance you're going to hand the ball off. So if you get one of those modes where it's 50 throws from Mitch Trubisky, and in the second half, you're just going to sling it, and you're just going to, your spread or your 4 wide or whatever, play action is not working in those situations. You have to keep some balance, even if it's not working, to be able to get to those play action looks. And in the games where the teams have been able to keep it close with Green Bay, it's been low possession number games where like 3-4 possessions in the first half, 3-4 possessions in the second half, long drives, 8-minute drives. And you can do that against Joe Barry. He's going to give you the underneath throws. He's going to give you the checkdowns. He's not going to let you go over the top. And he is going to assume that you're going to have a dumb holding penalty, or that he's going to create a sack, or that a ball is going to go off a receiver's hands, or they're going to create a negative run because Devondre Campbell shoots a gap and now it's 2nd and 12. Those are the things that they're banking on, drive in and drive out, to be a good defense. And it has worked so far.
And the Bears are really good at all of those things: passes to receivers' hands, holding, unnecessary sacks. I mean, that's the thing, is like, even against the Cardinals, like it kind of felt like a lot. I mean, not to take anything away from the Cardinals, but the Bears did a lot of beating themselves in that game with those interceptions, with those penalties, with those things where it's like they did move the ball fairly well against a pretty good Cardinals defense. And all things considered, they did okay against Kyler Murray's offense, just in the sense that he started 3 drives inside the 30-yard line. So, like, of course, he's going to score touchdowns on those, and
right,
you're going to give up 33 points, and it doesn't look very good for the defense. But, if you take away a couple of those interceptions and make the Cardinals drive down in that game, all of a sudden you feel a little bit better about the defensive performance. And I think that speaks to your point. Like the Packers are waiting for the other team to beat themselves, and unfortunately, the Bears are a team that does that regularly this season.
Yes. And has been the case, unfortunately, for at least for them, for a while now. There is also, I think this question, because it doesn't look like David Bakhtiari is going to be able to play. Josh Nijman is going to be out there at left tackle. He's played well. I mean, in 4 starts this year, and he's done it against the Bengals, the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Rams. So not exactly, our sisters of perpetual sorrow. Can't even get off my own joke. He played some really good fronts and held up. So, someone like, if they had a full complement of pass rushers, I think this would be a little bit scarier for the Packers. The Khalil Mack injury is a big thing, because Robert Quinn has been like really good. I thought the Bears overpaid for Robert Quinn. I thought that single season in Dallas was sort of an aberration. It was the first year he had been good in a couple years, and he's just been great. And so, that would be the one guy where it's like, okay, if you get 2 sacks from Robert Quinn and one is a sack fumble, like all of a sudden you need to create some turnovers. You need a special teams play. And by the way, the Packers special teams has been hot garbage for like, what year is it? Like forever. Since Craig Hentrick and Desmond Howard were playing in Green Bay. That's how long it's been trash. So that would be the other thing that would make me go, all right, well, if the Bears are going to do this, it's going to be because the defense creates, it's going to be like the first half of Bears-Packers 2018, only instead of Deshaun Kaiser, it's Aaron Rodgers. And instead of Khalil Mack, it's got to be Robert Quinn. That, I think, makes it a lot less likely, but that would be the thing that you're going, okay, if they're going to do it, this is how they would do it.
One name I'll throw out there just to keep an eye on it in that kind of discussion is the man starting in place of Khalil Mack, Trevis Gibson.
Yeah. He's someone who
was their 5th round pick last year. I mean,
he's made some plays. I've noticed in watching and studying Chicago, like he's doing stuff. And I don't know, I did not know that name before I started looking down. I like pulled up the R-Lads thing and I was like, who is this guy making all these plays? And he's someone that I think is a potential piece for them moving forward. I like that. What Lorin do you think is the ultimate outcome of this game?
You know, I don't think it's going to be great, but I think the Bears will keep it somewhat respectable. I mean, we were worried in previous stage of this season that we were going to reach like 2014 Mark Trestman versus the Packers level of like potential blowout. But I think the game against the Cardinals gave me enough to feel like, okay, it's not going to be a complete like wipe the floor type of thing. But I still think, double digits probably in that. Like the last game finished 14-24. I would probably go maybe a little bit worse than that, like a 14-27 type of thing, a 13-24. I mean, something in that type of range where I think Green Bay will score and the Bears maybe will find the end zone once or twice and maybe kind of get a late garbage touchdown to make it a little bit closer. But I don't feel like Chicago is going to ever feel like they were really in control or fighting for much of this game.
I think that's right. I have been waiting for the ass kicking for the Packers this year because I think they're a really good team. And I think I've said this over and over. If they're healthy, I think they're the favorite, but they're not healthy yet. And I don't think they're going to get healthy this week. That said, if they're a Super Bowl team, if they are a Super Bowl caliber team, they have to start beating the crap out of some of these bad teams. And I know it's a rivalry game. And so you never want to go in saying, this is what I think is going to happen. So I'm not going to predict that is going to happen, but I just need to have said at some point, they haven't done it yet. I believe they're going to do it to someone. And you mentioned I was going to bring up the 2014 game because I was just like, if that happens, I'm not going to be surprised just because this is what happens in December, a team that's really not playing for much against a team that is playing for everything. These things can get lopsided. And so because it's Packers Bears, out of respect for the rivalry, I actually don't think that will happen, but I think it's on the menu. I think it'll be close-ish and ultimately not close. So like 30, I think it's like 30-17, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like that. And it's like, 27-10 late in the game and they get a touchdown and the Packers get a field goal. And it's like, okay, yeah. So congratulations to everyone. And the Bears outscore them in the fourth quarter. And it's like, okay, cool. And then everyone goes on with their life. So that's, I think we're both on the same page with that. We'll both be back on our shows the rest of the week to keep breaking it down. Of course, we will be back next week to break down what happened on Sundays. And we want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Packers and Locked On Bears their first listen of the day. Your team and a cup of coffee, maybe a breakfast pastry, like some eggs. What could be better? I love it. Thanks to everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.